Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Ashley Martinez.
And Ms. Martinez, what do you do?
I'm an officer, a police officer.
And where do you work?
I work at the La Puntilla precinct.
And what is your life outside of the precinct?
I have 2 kids, Daniela and Mariana, and I have relationships outside the workforce, and it's just I'm a regular mom, regular cop.
Right. Now you said you have 2 children. How old are they?
Daniela is 8, Mariana is 6.
Ms. Martinez, or Officer Martinez, why are you here today?
I'm here because my girlfriend, my romantic partner, Corey Valentine, was shot, and Hunter Posada was the one who did it.
Ms. Meyer, you said your partner, Corey Valentine. What do you mean when you say your partner?
Well, we were romantic partners for several months before she was killed.
About how long?
About 7 or 8 months.
Now, you said she was killed. How was she killed?
She was at my house one night, and Hunter Posada came over. They got into a heated argument, and then I heard a blow. I was upstairs with my kids. And then I went downstairs, and I saw that she had been killed and that Hunter was dismembering her body.
Okay. You just gave a lot of information to the jury. I'd like to take that back. I'd like to first talk to you about the relationship between Miss Valentine and Mr. Posada. Now, you said you had a relationship with Miss Valentine. What was your relationship with Mr. Posada?
We had dated in the past, and he was kind of there for me when there was this video scandal, but we had ended that. And then I got with Corey, and sometime in with Corey, I invited Hunter into the relationship, but then we ended that.
Okay. About how long did that relationship last between the 3 of you?
I think about 2 months.
Now, when that relationship ended, how did Mr. Posada take that end of the relationship?
Objection, speculation.
What was the question?
When the relationship ended, how did Mr. Hunter take it?
Okay.
That was Jason.
All right. So I'll hear you.
Assuming you're outside the presence of the jury, simply by way of offer of proof, I'm asking that this witness testify to her personal knowledge about what Mr. Posada's response to the end of the relationship was, and I expect she's going to testify to the things that she observed personally and the statements by Mr. Posada.
What are the things that she observed?
Statements by Mr. Posada to Ms. Martinez regarding his unhappiness about the end of the relationship, that he didn't want it to end, and that he was going to continue courting her, and then also the actions which resulted in the continued relationship between the 2 of them.
So how is that speculation?
That is speculation because she doesn't know how Mr. Posada felt about the end of the relationship. She doesn't know what's in Mr. Posada's head.
But if her only response is what she actually observed, that wouldn't be speculative.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Overruled.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Officer Martinez, how did Mr. Posada respond to the end of the relationship?
He was very upset. He was very mad about it.
And how do you know this?
He told me that he didn't want it to end. He kept courting me. He said that he'd get me back eventually, and that he even proposed to me.
Okay. So before the proposal, you said he continued courting you.
Yes.
Was he successful in that?
Yes, we did have an affair after he left the relationship among Corey, myself, and him.
Okay. Now, you said that he even proposed to you.
Yes.
How did he go about doing that?
He gave me a ring and said that I should think about it, that my family could be his instead of Corey's.
Corey being Miss Valentine.
Yes.
Now, I'd like to take you to January 31st. Were you in contact with Mr. Hunter that day, or Mr. Posada that day?
Yes.
And how were you in contact with him?
He had called me. I was at home, and he called me to tell me that he was outside.
And what did you do when you learned that he was outside?
Well, I was nervous, so I let Corey know that he was outside and that he might do something.
And what happened after you notified Miss Valentine?
She said that she would take care of it, and she told me to go upstairs to my children.
Is that what you did?
Yes.
And what did you do when you went up to see your children?
So the girls were were in their room, and so I put them to sleep, and I just stayed there.
How did you put them to sleep?
I gave them Benadryl.
And was there anything else that you did?
Well, I put on a little bit of music to kind of help them calm down so they wouldn't hear the argument from downstairs.
Was there an argument downstairs?
Yes, it was a very loud, heated discussion.
Okay. What happened next?
After a few minutes, then I heard a blow, and I was scared. I was shocked, so I waited a few minutes before going downstairs.
When you went downstairs, what did you see?
I saw that Corey was shot and that Hunter was dismembering her body.
And how did Mr. Hunter, or excuse me, Mr. Posada, how did Mr. Posada appear when you saw him?
He just spoke to me like nothing. He said, you know, now I'd be his, and that was it. And he forced me to help him clean up the murder.
I'd like now to talk to you about what happened after you realized Miss Valentine was dead. So, you said you were scared. How did you respond to the scene that you saw?
Well, seeing Hunter there, I remembered all of the things that he used to tell me about how he once killed a homeless man.
Objection. This is character evidence.
All right. This isn't the one that I reserved ruling on, though, right?
It is, the homeless man that was killed.
I reserved ruling on the admission of the newspaper article, but not on the fact or the allegation that he killed him.
Okay.
So I'll deny or I'll overrule your objection.
He had told me that he had once killed a homeless man, and I also remembered another instance where he shot a suspect who had just hit me, and he scared me, and I felt trapped, and I didn't know what to do, and so he told me to help him, and I felt like I had to.
Why did you feel like you had to?
I was scared. I was trapped in all the lies. He was very terrifying. He was very violent. I was scared for my kids. I didn't know what he would do.
Why were you scared for your kids?
He said, actually, he threatened that if I didn't help him, that the same thing may happen to my children, what he had just done to Corey.
How did you go about helping him?
He made me clean up the kitchen. That's where Corey was shot. And then we put her body parts in a bag, and then we put that bag in the trunk of Corey's car.
And what happened next?
Then he had the idea to drive to my ex-husband's house because he knew that I'm in a custody battle with him, and he thought that implicating my ex could somehow help me in the custody battle. So we drove there and we dropped Corey's phone off. Then we continued to drive to La Perla neighborhood where he is from, and he had the idea that we'd leave the car there and then we can burn it a few days later.
Now, you said there was a plan to burn it.
Was the car burned?
It was burned. He told me he burned it 2 days later, I think on the 2nd, because it was the Fiesta of la Candelaria, where people burn things on the street, so it would go unnoticed.
And part of, you're here today because how is it that your story was brought how did the truth come out?
Well, at first I was still too scared to say anything to anybody, but then one day Chief Claudio called me into his office and he told me about the phone, of Corey's phone that they had found, and honestly it was just, I could finally tell the truth because I had a reason to.
And how did it feel when you could tell the truth?
I was relieved that I could finally tell the truth of what happened, how Hunter forced me to help him, how he killed Corey, of how I felt trapped and forced to lie for him.
Nothing further, Your Honor. People call Officer Martinez. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Ashley Martinez.
Ms. Martinez, what do you do?
I'm a police officer
Where are you a police officer?
in the city of San Juan in La Puntilla district, precinct.
And how long have you been a police officer?
I've been a cop for about 8 years now.
Now, aside from being a police officer, what is your other pride?
I'm a mother to 2 little girls.
And how old are they?
Daniela is 8 years old and Mariana is 6.
What is your professional relationship with Hunter Quesada?
We were patrol partners of a while back
And patrol partners where?
in San Juan in the same precinct.
And what is your professional relationship with Corey Valentine?
We were also fellow police officers from the same precinct.
I'd like now to talk to you about your personal relationships. Do you have a personal relationship with Hunter Quesada?
I do, yes.
Do you have a personal relationship with Corey Valentine?
Well, not anymore, but yes, I did.
Did you have a personal relationship with both of them?
Yes.
What was that relationship?
Well, the 3 of us, we were together.
When you say together, what do you mean by that?
We were involved sexually together at the same time.
And how long did that last?
That only lasted about 2 months.
Why did it end?
Corey was feeling that Hunter wanted me all for himself, so she asked me to break it off with Hunter since I invited him into the relationship.
What happened when you uninvited him to the relationship?
He didn't take it so well. He was very upset.
How do you know that?
He kept trying to get me back, and he even proposed to me.
Now, you said he kept trying to get you back. In what ways was he trying to get you back?
Well, he proposed to me.
All right, and so he proposed to you. What did you do when he proposed to you?
Well, I thought he was kidding, but he said, he gave me a ring, and he said, think about it. Your family could be mine. It doesn't have to be Corey's. So, I mean, he wanted me back, and it was scary.
Now, when you say Corey, that's Miss Valentine?
Yes.
What was your relationship with Miss Valentine at that point when he proposed to you?
She was my partner. We were still seeing each other.
I'd like to talk to you now about January 31st. Were you in contact with the defendant, Hunter Posada, on the 31st?
Yes,
How?
he called me to tell me that he was outside my house.
Where were you?
I was inside my house, and my kids were sleeping up, where my kids were upstairs.
Was anyone else with you?
Yes, Corey was with me.
Corey, Miss Valentine?
Yes.
When you got that call, what did you do?
Well, I was nervous. I knew how violent Hunter could be, so I told Corey. She told me to go upstairs to be with the kids and that she would take care of it.
Is that what you did? You went upstairs?
Yes, I went to my children.
While you were with your children, what was happening downstairs?
I heard that they started arguing, and then it got louder and louder, and then it just stopped.
When it stopped, what did you think?
Well, I was terrified. Right before it got quiet, I heard a thud, and that's when the silence happened. And so I was scared. I couldn't move. I stayed upstairs with my children for a few minutes before going downstairs.
What happened when you went downstairs?
That's when I saw Hunter cutting up Corey, her blood all over him, and then he said, "Now we can be together, my love," and it was too much.
I'd like to talk to you now, Officer Martinez, about the plan that Hunter Posada talked to you about. What happened after he told you? What did he say to you after he told you that he wanted to be with you now?
He threatened that if I didn't help him clean it up, the same thing could happen to my children. So I had to help him.
Okay. And what did he tell you he wanted you to do?
To clean up the mess, we put Corey's body in a bag, and then we put it in the trunk of her own car.
And what did he say he wanted to do with the body?
He wanted to take it to La Perla. That's where he grew up, and so he wanted to take the car over there.
Why did he want to take the car to La Perla?
He said that it'd be better to burn because a few days later would be the festival of the Candelaria, so it'd be easy to burn it there without anyone being suspicious about it.
What is the festival of Candelaria?
Well, it's a day where we honor the Virgin Mary and people burn things. So burning the car would have gone really unnoticed.
Was the car burned?
Yes.
And how do you know that?
Hunter told me he burned it a few days after it happened. It was February 2nd. It was the day of the festival.
Were you with him when the car was burned?
No, I wasn't.
Now, Officer Martinez, tell us why you helped why you helped the defendant after you realized that there was a murder?
I was terrified of what he could do, and he had just killed my lover, and he threatened my children, and we were all in the house, and I felt trapped. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to die, so I helped him.
Nothing further.
Right.
Mr. Rosado, Officer Rosado, Ms. Valentine came to you with information that Mr. Posada was accepting bribes from drug dealers, right?
Correct.
And Ms. Valentine told you that she had no independent evidence that Ms. Martinez had anything to do with it, right?
Correct.
And that the reason why Ms. Valentine was hesitant to report is because of Mr. Posada's threats against her, right?
Correct.
Now, when you looked at the text messages that Ms. Martinez showed you, you thought the text didn't sound like Ms. Valentina, right?
That's correct.
And you thought that the explanation that Ms. Martinez gave sounded fishy, right?
Yes.
And you saw blood on the kitchen floor of Ms. Martinez's home, isn't that right?
That is correct.
There was blood in the home of somebody you suspected of wrongdoing, isn't that right?
That's correct.
But you helped her clean the blood up, didn't you?
Right.
Because you thought her explanation was sufficient, right?
Right.
Now, you also claimed that you thought there was a machete involved at Ms. Martinez's home, right?
Yes.
But there was no machete ever found at her home, was there?
No, not at that home.
Now, you paid this visit to Ms. Martinez on the 2nd, isn't that right?
Yes.
But you never talked to Chief Claudio about it until 5 days later, isn't that right?
Right.
Even though there was an active investigation at that point?
Right.
An investigation into the disappearance of Ms. Valentin.
Right.
I'd like now to talk to you about your relationship with Chief Claudio. Now, you didn't like that Chief Claudio transferred her nephew into the precinct, isn't that right?
No, I didn't.
And you also have accused Chief Claudio of being an incompetent investigator, is that right?
Right, yeah.
And you've actually filed a corruption complaint against Chief Claudio, haven't you?
A corruption complaint? Yes, I have.
You think that you could do a better job as chief than Chief Claudio.
Oh, yeah, of course.
You want to be the chief of police, is that right?
That is very correct.
You think you should be running the precinct.
Right.
And you think you could have done a better job of investigating this case than Chief Claudio, isn't that right?
Of course.
Even though you had an affair with Corey Valentino?
Yeah, I can.
And isn't it true that just like Hunter Posada, you asked Corey to end the relationship between Valentin and Martinez?
I did.
Nothing further. Mr. Rosado, you testified that Miss Valentin, the victim, came to you to get your opinion on an issue, right?
Correct.
And that issue was that she had verified evidence that the defendant, Mr. Posada, was involved in a bribery scheme. Isn't that right?
Correct.
Bribery scheme involving drug dealers.
Yes.
And that she did not have any independent evidence that Ms. Martinez was involved in any sort of
Correct.
scheme, right?
Correct.
Now, she also told you that Hunter found, Mr. Posada, the defendant, found out about her knowledge of this scheme and confronted her about it, didn't he?
Right.
Now, you went to Miss Martinez's home, didn't you?
I did.
And when you went there, you asked her about the disappearance of Miss Valentin, right?
Right.
And you did this on February 2nd?
Yes.
And you saw the text messages from, that were supposedly from Miss Valentin, isn't that right?
Right.
And you said that they didn't sound like her, isn't that true?
Yeah.
And you thought they sounded fishy to you?
Right.
And then you just testified that you saw some blood on the floor in the kitchen,
Right.
and that you then helped Miss Martinez clean up the blood from the floor on the floor in the kitchen.
I did.
And you've also made an accusation that you thought that Miss Martinez had a machete, isn't that right?
I have in the past, yeah.
And that you thought that machete may have been involved in the crime,
I have in the past, yeah.
and there was no machete discovered at Miss Martinez's house, was there?
I don't believe so.
Now, you observed all of these things that you said sounded fishy when you went on that visit on the 2nd, right? But you didn't sit down with the chief of police to report any of it until 5 days later, right?
That's correct.
That was on February 7th.
Yes.
I'd like to talk to you now about your relationship with Chief Claudio.
All right.
Now, you're the number 2 in the police department, aren't you?
Second in command.
The only person above you is Chief Claudio, isn't that right?
Yep.
And you didn't like when Chief Claudio transferred his nephew into his precinct.
No, of course not.
And you've accused Chief Claudio of being an incompetent investigator, isn't that right?
Yes.
And you've actually filed in the past a corruption complaint against Chief Claudio.
Yes, I have.
You think you should have ran the investigation of Ms. Valentine's disappearance, isn't that right?
Yes. Ashley Martinez is involved, and that means Dan Claudio's involved, and it's hard to be impartial with all that going on.
And you thought you could do a better job than the chief at investigating this crime, right?
Yeah. Corey Valentine was my friend.
You knew that it was important that as much evidence is collected as soon as possible in order to investigate this crime correctly, right?
Right.
And that it was important that the investigation had all the possible evidence before it
Right.
as soon as possible.
Mm.
And you still, and you knew that when you went and visited Miss Martinez's home on the 2nd, that there was an investigation at that point, right?
Right.
But still you didn't report any of the things that you saw, and you said you were thought was suspect for 5 days.
Right.
You want to be the chief of police, don't
I
you?
do.
And you think you should be directing the precinct, don't you?
Sure.
You knew that if this investigation didn't go well, that the current chief, Chief Claudio, his job could be on the line, didn't it?
It could be. I mean, I don't know. I don't really necessarily know that, but it could be.
As a police officer, you have a duty to report suspicion of a crime, don't you?
I do.
To report that as soon as possible.
Right.
But still you waited 5 days, right?
Yes, you made that point earlier.
Nothing further on.
All right.
The love triangle is never as simple as participants want it to be. At the beginning of today's trial, my co-counsel, Mr. Alex Sneerson, he came before you and he told you that we were going to prove 3 crimes to you. That Mr. Hunter Posada, the defendant, murdered Corey Valentine. That he destroyed evidence of that murder. That the defendant, Mr. Posada, concealed evidence of that murder. And he told you that we were going to prove those 3 crimes to you using 2 points. The first point, that Corey Valentine was in Hunter Posada's way. The second, that Hunter Posada, the defendant, destroyed and covered up the key evidence of the murder. I'd like to talk to you now about point number 1. Corey Valentine was in Hunter Posada's way. You heard from Miss Martinez that Corey Valentine and Miss Ashley Martinez were in a relationship together. A serious relationship. They've been together for 8 months. And for a short time, about 2 months of that relationship, the defendant was invited to be a participant. But after 2 months, Miss Valentine and Miss Martinez decided that the defendant should not be part of that relationship anymore. And you heard from Miss Martinez that the defendant did not like that. the defendant wanted Ashley Martinez for himself. He didn't want a poly relationship. He didn't want the two of them together. He wanted Ashley Martinez. And that Corey Valentine was what was stopping him. You heard from Ms. Martinez that despite the ending of the relationship, Mr. Posada, the defendant, continued to court her. He continued to pressure her. He continued to chase after her. He couldn't stand the thought that he was losing the person that he wanted to be with to another woman. Eventually, Ms. Martinez told you that Mr. Posada was successful in getting her to engage in an affair with him. And that after a short time of that affair together, the defendant actually proposed to Ms. Martinez. Threw her a ring, and he said, "Your family could be mine, not Corey's." Not Corey's. A few days later, on the night of January 31st, Ms. Martinez told you that she received a text message from Mr. Posada, the defendant, that he was outside of her house and that he was coming in, that he couldn't wait any longer. He could not be rejected. He wanted to be with Ashley. Ms. Martinez told her partner, Corey Valentine, that he was there, and she was furious. And told Ms. Martinez to go upstairs with the children. Ms. Martinez told you she's a proud mother of an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old. That she loves them and she cares for them. She also told you how she's always wanted to be a police officer. And what that means to her, how important that is to her. She took her children upstairs, and because she could hear the commotion of Corey Valentine, her partner, and Mr. Posada, the defendant, engaged in an argument, a heated discussion that was escalating. Ms. Martinez told you that she put music on for the children, and she gave them some Benadryl because she didn't want them to have to experience what was happening down there. And while she was doing that, she heard the conversation escalate, come to a blow, and then there was silence. Ms. Martinez was there. She was in the house. She heard the murder. When she went down those stairs, she told you what she saw. She saw the defendant, Hunter Posada, standing over the dead body of the victim, Corey Valentine. That Mr. Posada said to her, "Now we can be together." Now I'd like to talk to you about point number 2. That Mr. Hunter Posada destroyed and concealed the key evidence in this case. Ms. Martinez tells us how she got wrapped up into this scheme, this plot, cover-up. That she was terrified. That the defendant threatened her. That if she didn't cooperate with him and help him with the body, that he was going to kill her children who were sleeping upstairs. He, Mr. Posada alone, chopped up the body and made Ms. Martinez help him put it in bags and put it in the car. That's what Ms. Martinez tells us. and that Hunter Posada gets behind the wheel of the car and drives it to La Perla, a neighborhood that he knows well, because he grew up there. And it's in that neighborhood where they leave the car. And as the defendant, Mr. Posada, tells us himself, later he returns alone to burn the body. Hunter Posada cut up the body. Hunter Posada put the body in the car. Hunter Posada drove the car with now his second victim, Miss Martinez, in the seat, terrified for her life. If she didn't cooperate, the same thing would happen to her or her children. She also told you about her other knowledge about Mr. Hunter Posada, that he had made statements to her regarding a violent history of killing a homeless man, and her personal witnessing of him shooting somebody while on duty. These were the things that were running through her mind when she was forced to assist him. Ms. Martinez tells you this. She told you that from the stand where she was under oath to tell the truth. Now the defense has tried to paint a picture that Ms. Martinez is only doing this because of some immunity deal. In fact, they want you to believe that she's lying in order to secure this immunity deal. But the immunity deal only covers and protects Ms. Martinez as a key witness to a murder if she tells the truth. If she were not telling the truth, or it was discovered that she was not telling the truth, she would be prosecuted. And she still could be, if she lies. You also heard some other things from the defense about a sexual harassment case. But you heard from Chief Claudio that it was the district attorney's office who extended the immunity deal to Ms. Martinez, not Chief Claudio. Chief Claudio's personal affairs had nothing to do with the immunity deal. You also heard from another witness, Mr. Tyler Rosado, who went up here and tried to tell you that there was a sham investigation to help further this defense by the defense. But you also heard that Mr. Rosado has his eye on the position of chief, that he wants to be the chief, that he has a vendetta against Chief Claudio. Consider all this evidence when you decide who to believe. Hunter Posada murdered Corey Valentino. Hunter Posada destroyed the key evidence. And Hunter Posada concealed key evidence. Find Hunter Posada, the defendant, guilty of the murder of Corey Valentino.
Rebuttal?
Ms. Page just came before you and gave you a list of reasons about how it could have been somebody, anybody, other than Hunter. How if the chief had searched longer, maybe he would have found something else. How there simply just wasn't enough evidence, or that there was a he said, she said. Ladies and gentlemen, we are standing in court. The witnesses that you heard from were under oath. And what we have is an eyewitness telling you, not maybe who could have been, but who actually was standing over Ms. Valentine's body who actually cut up into pieces Miss Valentine's body, and you heard from the defendant himself who burned Miss Valentine's body. It was Hunter Posada. Find him guilty. Love triangle is simple. Until someone gets jealous. Someone always gets jealous. Hunter Posada got jealous. Beginning of today's trial, my co-counsel, Mr. Alexander Sneerson, came before you, and he told you that we were going to prove 3 charges against the defendant. The murder of Corey Valentine, obstruction of justice, concealment of evidence. I told you we were going to prove these 3 crimes to you with just 2 points. That the defendant, Hunter Posada, was in love with Ashley Martinez, and that Corey Valentine was in his way. Point number 1, Corey Valentine was in Hunter Posada's way. Point number 2, that the defendant, Posada, destroyed the key pieces of evidence that proved he was the murderer. I'd like to talk to you about point number 1. You heard from Officer Martinez. She took the stand, and under oath, she told you about the relationship that she had between the personal relationship that she had with Hunter Posada and the victim, Corey Valentine. Officer Martinez told you that at one point the 3 of them were involved in an intimate relationship. All 3 of them. And at some point, the victim, Corey Valentine, told her that she didn't want the defendant to be a part of that relationship anymore. You heard Officer Martinez tell you that the defendant did not like that. That he kept pursuing her. He kept courting her. He chased after her, and he said things to her like, you're going to be with me no matter what. We even heard that the defendant proposed to Officer Martinez. He gave her a ring, and he said the words, "Your family can be my family, not Corey's." You heard the defendant himself tell you about the relationship that the 3 of them shared together. Not disputable. Then that takes us to the night of January 31st. Officer Martinez tells you that she received a phone call that night, and it was from the defendant. Officer Martinez was inside of her home with her significant other, Corey Valentine, and her 2 young children, 8 and 6 years old. And that when she received this call from the defendant, he said to her, "I'm outside of your house." He wasn't going to take it anymore. It wasn't over for the defendant. He had to be with Officer Martinez. Martinez told us that she told Corey Valentine that the defendant was outside the house and that she told her to take the kids and go upstairs. And that Miss Valentine was going to handle the situation. Ms. Martinez told you what happened next. that when she took the children upstairs and was putting them to bed, she could hear the conversation, that it was getting louder and louder. It was intensifying. There was a shouting match. And then she heard nothing. That there was silence. And that just before the silence, she'd heard a blow. When she came down the stairs, she testified to what she saw. She saw the defendant, Hunter Posada, standing over the body of the victim, covered in her blood, with the body dismembered. And Officer Martinez testified that what the defendant said to him was, "Now we can be together. Now you're mine forever." I'd like to talk to you about the second point. That Hunter Posada destroyed the key evidence to link him to the murder. We heard from Chief Claudio, chief of the precinct. She took the stand and she told us about her investigation, about how Corey Valentine had gone missing, had not reported for work. And that after a couple days, 2 days, there was a report of a fire. A car was on fire, and the officer who responded to the fire said he thought it looked like Corey Valentine's car. The chief went down to the scene, and they were able to get the VIN number off of the car. You heard the chief explain to you that a VIN number is an identification number that I can identify the specific vehicle that it's stamped into, and that using records, they can trace who the owner of the vehicle is. You heard him say that they got the VIN number and they confirmed that it was in fact the victim's car. You also heard the chief testify to the body parts that were found in the car. And that when they sent those parts for a forensic analysis, they were able to pull an identification number from a surgical piece that was in one of the body parts. And that they were able to trace again and find out that it was from a surgery that the victim had gone through several years earlier. They identified the body of Corey Valentine. The car was on fire and was later burned, and as a result burned to beyond recognition. Using this evidence, in addition to cell phone triangularizations, the police told you, the chief of police told you that their investigation led them to the defendant. And that it was at that point that they were able to talk to Ms. Martinez, and she was able to come forward with the truth of what happened. About how after she discovered the murder in her home, the defendant threatened the life of her children and threatened her life. You heard Ms. Martinez tell you that she knew him to be a violent person. She was looking at him standing over a body covered in blood, and that she was afraid for her life, her children's lives, and that's why she helped him with the cover-up. The chief went to the defendant's house, and there he found the victim's cell phone. All this evidence, the defendant was charged. You heard from Ms. Martinez that it was the defendant who murdered Corey Valentine. It was the defendant who cut her body into pieces. It was the defendant who drove the car to the site to dispose of it. And then it was the defendant alone who went back and burned the body and the evidence. The defense is trying to distract you with something called an immunity agreement. Immunity agreement is something that is a regular part of the law of prosecuting a case. You have witnesses who are key to getting the truth into a case. When you have testimony that you need to be brought to a court so that the truth can be put on display, to get answers. Oftentimes, without these agreements, the truth will never come out. In this case, we have evidence, objective evidence, of the cell phone records, the burned car, of the phone in the defendant's house. And then we also have the eyewitness testimony of Officer Martinez. Weigh all of the evidence. You also heard from Ms. Martinez that if she didn't tell the truth today, that immunity agreement means nothing. If she's found to have lied, it means nothing. She's here to tell the truth. Ms. Page is going to come up here, and she's going to make her arguments to you. And I'll have a few minutes more after she's done to talk to you. While she's talking to you, I want you to look at the objective evidence and think about who you can believe in this case. Which witnesses should you believe? Ms. Page just came up here and told you the right standard, beyond a reasonable doubt. But I want to clarify that there's a difference between possible doubt and reasonable doubt. Just because there's a possibility of a different situation, that there's a possibility that something else happened, that's not the same as reasonable, a reasonable doubt. We have objective evidence in this case. We know that Hunter Posada, the defendant, was there at the scene of the crime. We know that Hunter Posada went and burned the car alone. We have the evidence of the car being burned on the night of Candelaria, just as Officer Martinez told us the defendant told her he was planning to do. Again, Officer Martinez, if she is caught in one lie in this stand, her immunity is gone. Hunter Posada, the defendant, killed the victim. The defendant cut up the victim's body. The defendant drove the car to the neighborhood where he grew up. The defendant burned the car. The defendant alone burned the car. Find him guilty.